Now that you've got your starter going, I'm going to show you how to bake a beautiful rustic loaf of sourdough bread. It's a long ferment recipe, which means you'll want to start it in the evening, ferment it all night, and bake it the following day. The tools you'll need to bake a sourdough loaf of bread are a plastic or glass mixing bowl with either a lid or some saran wrap to cover it up, a cast iron pot for baking, a wooden spoon, a big piece of parchment paper, a spray bottle with some water in it, a bowl scraper, a bread lom or a very sharp knife, and a banneton or a rising basket with a tea towel. Starting with your kitchen scale at 0, we'll put the bowl on it and tare it so we have a 0 set. And then we'll start by adding 200 grams of starter, okay. A little bit over is okay. Then we'll add 400 grams of water, 100 grams of milk, and 15 grams of sea salt. I'm going to mix this together first. Just to kind of get the salt distributed, thin out the starter a little bit. I'm going to tare it back to 0 so that when I measure out my flour, it's nice and easy. And I'm going to do 800 grams of all-purpose white flour. All right, never apologize. Mix together with the wooden spoon until a dough begins to form. Then when the mixture begins to tighten, knead it together on a clean counter to form a smooth ball. Kneading dough is simply squeezing, pushing, rolling, and working the dough until all the dry bits are incorporated. You'll feel the dough begin to tighten and become tougher the more you work it. That's the gluten developing. Once it has formed into a single tight ball, begin folding the outside into the center of the dough, applying heavy pressure, working all the way around the dough until you've completed a full circle and incorporated the whole thing. This not only kneads and helps develop gluten, but also acts as an effective shaping method. Flip the ball over and you should have a nice, smooth surface. Return the dough to the bowl, cover tightly with plastic wrap or a lid, and let rise for 2 hours. The sourdough bread that we prepared earlier has been rising for 2 hours, so we're going to shape it and then put it in the fridge to rise overnight so that we can bake it in the morning. So what I have prepared is a banneton, a clean tea towel, some flour, and a plastic bag. So first what I'm going to do is lightly flour the surface of the counter so that I can shape the dough without it getting too sticky. And it just comes out of the bowl pretty easily. So all I'm gonna do is shape it inward like we did originally by folding the outside of the dough to the center to form a really smooth ball. Got a nice ball, and I'm gonna just go around and tuck it with my hands like this as I spin to get just a really nice smooth surface. I'm gonna take my banneton, line it with the tea towel, and then I'm gonna flour it pretty generously before I lay the dough in, smooth side down, seam side up. Then just to prevent from sticking, I'll flour the top a little bit more, and I'll fold this over. And then it'll go into a plastic bag. And I'll stick it in the fridge overnight. Our sourdough bread dough has been rising overnight, and I'm just gonna take it out of the fridge and set it on the counter to reach room temperature for a couple hours. So our bread dough has been rising to room temperature for about 3 hours, and it's ready to score and bake. So we'll get started on that. So I'm preheating my oven to 500 right now, and I'm actually gonna stick this cast iron pot in the oven so that it gets hot with the oven and I can put the bread directly into the hot pot. So what I need to do first is position my oven racks to the center so it's low enough for the pot to fit in the oven all the way. And we'll just let that preheat. So while the oven and the Dutch oven are getting hot, I'm going to show you how to prep the dough onto the parchment paper and score it. So just gently peel the tea towel away, and you'll see that there's a little bit of a spiral marking from the banneton, which is really pretty, and it just kind of adds to the aesthetic of the loaf. I'm going to scrape off a little bit extra flour. If there's any spots with a lot of, like a big chunk of flour, just scrape it off because it's going to taste raw once it's finished, and nobody likes that. To score your bread dough, you want to hold the loam at an angle and use sure, quick motions. If you're creating a surface pattern, you'll do a more shallow cut. If you want to create an ear or a larger flap for the bread to bloom and open up as it bakes, you'll do a deeper cut. So I'm going to do one large cut on one side and a surface pattern of wheat on the other side. So I'm starting here, and I'm just going to make one sure motion, nice and deep. You can see that it's about a 1/4 inch deep, and that'll turn into a nice ear that will lift up. As your sourdough expands, it'll create a little bloom. So on this side, I'm going to do a wheat pattern that's a little bit more of a surface slash. And I'm just going to do short downward cuts and create the other side. And it'll look really pretty once it's finished. Okay, so we're ready to put the dough into the oven, and what I've got nearby is my spray bottle and my dough so that I can do this process quickly. The cast iron is really, really hot now. It's 500 degrees because we preheated it in the oven. So I'm going to take it out and take the lid off, and then just carefully I'm going to lower the paper with the dough into the pot. And it's okay if your paper gets a little messed up. You can straighten it out. Okay. So now that we've got the dough in the cast iron, We're going to spray it really quickly with water and cover it immediately. This creates steam in the pot that will help us get that really good golden crusty sourdough that we're looking for. Okay. And we'll just pop it in. So once I put my bread in covered in the Dutch oven, I'm going to lower the temperature to 450. And that will bake covered for 20 minutes, and then we'll check on it and uncover it and finish it off. So the timer just went off, so I'm going to check the dough and remove the lid, and if it looks good, I'm going to bake it for another 25 minutes to really brown and crisp up the crust. So you can see it's expanded a lot. This ear that we cut really lifted up and let the dough bloom. So it looks great. We're just gonna slide it back in and let it keep going for 25 until it's really nice and brown. Okay, our bread timer just went off and it's ready to come out. You can see by checking that it just gets this really beautiful brown color and it has grown a lot from the heat. So we'll take it out. The parchment paper gets fragile from heat, so it rips easily. So if you need to change the kind of mitts you use, just lift the whole thing out and set it on a cooling rack. And you can see this really pretty wheat pattern that we put on there, and then the nice big ear that we added when we scored the dough. So we'll leave it there to cool for about an hour before we cut into it. The cooling process is part of the cooking process when it comes to sourdough bread, so you want to let it cool completely. It's best eaten the day that it was baked, and it's really delicious with some good butter. There you have it. With just some flour, water, and time, you can bake the most delicious home-baked creations. Thank you so much for watching Get Bready Sourdough 101, the starter basics and an everyday sourdough bread. I had a great time baking with you today. If you enjoyed this course, leave me a review, then go check out my sourdough pretzel bagels and sourdough cinnamon rolls courses. See you next time. And then we're gonna just lift the bread, paper and all, onto a cooling rack.